Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where during the previous night, according to information we have, the Ukrainians carried out one of the biggest attacks in the direction of the central part of Russia using hundreds of drones. Pro-Ukrainian sources yesterday in the evening stated that the Ukrainians were using around 300 of drones to attack the territory of Russia, but this morning the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation published completely different numbers. The Russians reported that the Ukrainians used 660 drones to attack the territory of Russia just during the overnight attack. As of the morning of the 26th of June, between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., the Russians destroyed additional 46 drones, which means that between the evening of the 25th and 9 a.m. of the 26th of June of 2026, the Russians destroyed more than 700 of drones that were trying to attack objects of Russia through the entire territory of the Russian Federation. But the most important thing of these numbers is that this morning on the 26th of June of 2026 and during the night, we didn't receive almost anything on this matter. So we don't have videos with explosions through oil refineries of Russia. We don't have videos of explosions through oil bases and so on. And this is a very important situation. The Russians are saying that the previous night attack, the overnight attack, was one of the biggest since the beginning of the special military operation, and we have nothing on the matter of results of this attack, which means that the Russians either managed to destroy everything that was launched by the Ukrainians, or the Ukrainians were launching hundreds of decoys with the purpose to overload Russia's air defense forces and so on. But anyway, these two options are very interesting, and let's wait and see what is going to happen next. But another important thing that I would like to point to attention is that the Ukrainians right now use long-range drones that can fly deep inside of the territory of Russia, deep inside for 2,000 kilometers. But due to the fact that since the beginning of this year, the Russians have already destroyed more than 150 gas stations through the eastern and the southern parts of Ukraine, the Russians have already destroyed thousands probably already of trucks through the same territories. This forced the Ukrainians to move their launching sites. For example, before this situation with gas stations and parking sites, the Ukrainians usually were using these territories to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. The Ukrainians had possibilities to bring trucks in this area to use this territory, and the Ukrainians from this launching site were launching their drones deep inside of the territory of Russia, which means that the Russians didn't have enough of time to react. They didn't have enough of time to reorganize their air defense forces, to redeploy them, and to get prepared before any massive attack that had been taking place almost since the beginning of this year. But due to the situation that the Russians destroyed so many gas stations, so many parking sites, and so many trucks, this situation forced the Ukrainians to pull their launching site further in the western direction, almost till the river of Dnipro. And of course, this situation, this redeployment of launching sites, increased the length of roads for more than 300 kilometers, which means that the Russians currently have more time for reaction. The Russians can have more time to understand where exactly the Ukrainians are going to attack, and this situation probably improves the total Russia's air defense capabilities. As of the previous days, we receive lots of updates, of course, on the matter of strikes, but these days the Ukrainians are attacking only Crimea and the southern regions, which means that, and they're doing this because they can launch drones from the same launching site that we have just drawn on the map, but from the other side, the distance between this launching site and the territory of Crimea and the southern regions is very small, which means that the Russians basically don't have time for reaction. They don't have time for reaction to repel these mid-strikes. But the most important thing, that's when the Russians finish the battle with gas stations and parking sites along the line of combat contacts along the eastern parts of Ukraine, of course, the Russians will move and they will shift their focus in the direction of the central part of Ukraine, and most likely this situation is going to start happening somewhere in the end of July, at the beginning of August. And when it happens, when Russians begin attacking all these territory on the matter of gas stations and parking sites, this would force the Ukrainians to move their launching site further in the direction of the western parts of Ukraine, and this situation will allow the Russians to control any strike from the Ukrainian side deep inside of the territory of Russia, and which means that the Russians somewhere probably by the end of September would be able to normalize the situation with fuel, with logistics through the regions like Crimea, Kherson, Donetsk and Lugansk. Now let's move further and let's discuss the Russian overnight attack. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians also attacked the territory of Ukraine between the 25th and the 26th of June of 2026. The Russians were attacking two places of Ukraine, the city of Kyiv and the Kremenchuk oil refinery. The sources reported that the Russians were using hundreds of drones and several missiles. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine this morning reported that the Russians used 196 air vehicles during the previous night's attack, including hundreds of drones, around 200 of drones, and around 10 missiles of different types. The Russians were using Iskander missiles and hypersonic missiles of Zircon type. The Ukrainians, according to their data, managed to bring down 3 Iskander missiles. And during the nights, we received lots of videos on this matter. In this video, we can see Russian missiles that were intercepted over the sky of the city of Kyiv. In this video, we can see more missiles or drones flying in the direction of the capital Ukraine that were intercepted by the armed forces of Ukraine. So, as you can see, some drones and missiles were intercepted by the Ukrainians, but despite this situation, the Russians managed to hit a military base and some military facilities through the eastern parts of the city of Kyiv. We're talking about this territory. As you can see, there are some barracks, some hangars, and there is a military base of the armed forces of Ukraine. As a result of attack, a fire broke out immediately, black smoke over the city of Kyiv. This is the current situation. And here we have another video published by pro-Russian sources, and here we have another video of a fire that's broke out right after the Russians attacked these facilities, which means that something important probably was destroyed by Russians. Either this is fuel storage, or the Russians managed to destroy some ammo depot where the Ukrainians were storing missiles, probably to Patriot systems or something like this. Another important territory that was attacked by Russians is the Kremenchuk oil refinery. This is the biggest oil refinery in the territory of Ukraine. As a result of attack this morning, at least 3 independent fire anomalies were recorded through this facility in the southwestern, northern, and eastern parts of the settlement, and the sources reported that the Russians were attacking these oil tanks, these facilities, and this power station. So at least 3 objects on the territory of this station were hit by Russians and probably significantly damaged. Now let's talk about drone strikes. Once again, the Russians during these days are focused just on attacks on gas stations and parking sites. And today, according to information we have, the Russians destroyed another gas station between the cities of Zaporizhzhia and Dnipro. We're talking about this gas station along NO8 road. And here we have a video published by pro-Russian sources. And here we have vehicles, civilians moving along the road between Dnipro and Zaporizhzhia. And here we have a black smoke that broke out right after the Russians attacked the territory. So another gas station was destroyed, and now the Russians are approaching the number of 160 gas stations destroyed since the just beginning of this year. Another gas station was destroyed in the southern parts of the city of Zaporizhzhia. We have already discussed this attack yesterday, but today we received another video where we can see this gas station from another angle, and as you can see, according to this explosion, this gas station was completely loaded with fuel. And a third gas station was destroyed on the territory of the city of Sumy. Here we have several pictures published by pro-Russian sources, and here we can see what's left from this gas station after the Russians attacked this territory. And we have a fire of the consequences of the morning attack on the 26th of June of 2026. The Russians continue creation a buffer zone through the eastern parts of Ukraine and through the southern regions, with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to move their launching site as deep as possible in the western direction of the western parts of Ukraine. And if it happens, as we discussed, most likely more and more times, we will see the massive overnight attacks from the Ukrainian side without results, like we can see today on the 26th of June of 2026. At the same time, the sources reported that the Russians are ready for the next massive attack. The next combined Russian attack, missile and drone attack involving strategic aviation has been delayed due to large-scale training missions taking place from Ukrainka Air Base in the Far East. 295 MS and 160 strategic bombers are taking part, along with Il-78M aerial refineries. They are expected to continue tonight. This does not rule out the possibility of a large-scale attack taking place without strategic aviation, so which means that maybe the Russians will attack Ukraine, but just using Iskander missiles, just using hypersonic missiles of Zircon type, and hundreds of drones. But probably the Russians will finish drills through the eastern parts of the Russian Federation, and then they will attack the territory of Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. We have lots of very interesting changes and very interesting updates. And first, let's talk about the northern directions where the Russians continue their offensive operation. The most important updates are coming from the northeastern part of the Kharkiv direction, where the Russians, according to the group of forces north, managed to break through Ukraine's defense answer basically the Belyi Kolodiaz agglomeration. This information was published by pro-Russian sources. They reported that the clashes are taking place for the settlement by the name of Zemlyanoy Yar, so that the Russians are there and that the Russians managed to dig in deeper, and this is already, as you can see, basically the Belyi Kolodiaz agglomeration. And we believe that this situation happened right after the Russians managed to destroy the biggest warehouse on the territory of Belyi Kolodiaz between the 13th and the 16th of June of 2026. Let's discuss this in details. We have these videos. So the Russian major offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Belyi Kolodiaz started somewhere between 14th and the 26th of June of 2026. For example, this video was published during the 21st of June of 2026, and here we can see how Russians attacked this facility, and I would like to point your attention to this strike. Here we have big facilities, some power station, and the Russians attacked a facility on the territory of this power station, and as a result of attack, as you can see, the entire block, the entire micro district of the city of Belyi Kolodiaz was reduced to ruins as a result of the primary attack and as a result of the secondary attack. And in this video we can see the consequences of attack. As you can see, the central heart of the Belyi Kolodiaz defense line was destroyed just as a result of one aviation strike. Furthermore, somewhere around the 14th of June, we had another video where we can see more strikes from the Russian side. So, summarizing everything, we see that between the 14th and the 20th of June of 2026, the Russians carried out several strikes in the direction of this central part of the city of Belyi Kolodiaz, and as a result of those attacks, these facilities and these warehouses, these strongholds, were basically reduced to ruins, and that allowed the Russians to begin their major offensive operation in the direction of the city itself. And due to the fact that most likely the Ukrainians were completely armless, the Russians managed to break through Ukraine's defense and answer the settlement of Zemlyanoy Yar, where the Russians right now are trying to dig in deeper. At the same time, and during the same period of time between the 14th and the 26th of June of 2026, we were receiving hundreds of updates about Russian strikes through the northwestern parts of the city of Kharkiv. If you remember, during the same period of time, the Russians destroyed this object of logistics logistics in the northwestern parts of the city of Kharkiv. This is another warehouse, and the Russians destroyed another warehouse along the MO3 road to the west of the city of Kharkiv. And here we have another video published by pro-Russian sources. So which means that the Russians just between the 14th and the 26th of June of 2026 destroyed several strategical warehouses of the armed forces of Ukraine in the direction of the city of Kharkiv. That's led to the situation of significant drop of Ukraine's armed forces capabilities through this area. And these strikes and this destruction of these warehouses allowed the Russians during the same period of time basically break through Ukraine's defense through the settlement of Kazachia Lopo. The clashes in this area still continue, and the Russians managed to break through Ukraine's defense through the Belyi Kolodiaz direction, and as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to answer the Belyi Kolodiaz agglomeration itself. And if Ukrainians, under the pressure of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, lose control over the settlement of Belyi Kolodiaz, this is going to be basically the beginning of the end for the entire northeastern parts of the Kharkiv direction, because from these positions, the Russians would be able to maintain the line, to shorten the distances, and to begin advancing further in the southern direction with the purpose to recapture the territories the Russians lost during the major Kharkiv counteroffensive operation of 2022 that was carried out by the armed forces of Ukraine. As for the Slavyansk-Konstantinovka direction, as for other directions, during the previous 24 hours, nothing was recorded. The only direction worth attention is the western Zaporizhzhia direction. As you can see, we have huge changes, and these are the changes on the ground. Today, pro-Russian sources published more videos of how Russians were attacking edge positions of the armed forces of Ukraine through these territories. And as a result of these attacks, we came to the conclusion that the Ukrainians managed to break through Russia's defense and to get the settlement of Plavny and the settlement of Kremenchuk. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that several days ago we had a video where we could see how the Ukrainians destroyed the bridge further in the south along the M18 road. This video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, so according to all these updates, we can see that the situation is quite difficult. Through the western Zaporizhzhia direction, the Ukrainians continue their counterattacks. As of the morning of the 26th of June of 2026, several pro-Russian sources stated that there was a rotation, that there was a group of Russian forces that managed to take under complete control all these territories through the western Zaporizhzhia direction almost till the settlement of Veselyanka. I would like to remind that by the 30th of April of 2026, all these territories were under Russian control, but then the Russians began rotation, and the unit that was responsible for such an advance in the past was removed from this area to stabilize the situation in the squad. Another group of forces was deployed in this area, and this unit lost almost everything. But today, several pro-Russian sources stated that the Russians came back in this area, those who managed to take all these territories before collapse began, and now the Russians began a counter-offensive operation in this area, and several pro-Russian sources stated that in coming days we might start receiving changes on the ground, but this time back in the Russian favor. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to happen next, but due to the current situation with the siege of Zaporizhzhia and with all these gas stations destroyed by Russians and parking sites, we believe that the Russians would be able to improve their positions most likely. And that's it for the short video. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.